Right now, we have a chance to discuss the attacks on American diplomats with Mr. Patrick Henningsen, a geopolitical analyst for the UK column Current Affairs website. Good to see you again, Mr. Henningsen. Now, these attacks happened in countries where Washington was directly involved in regime change. What does that say about the effect the revolts have had on the U.S.?
Well, this is a very interesting development, and what you can deduce from this is basically, you know, the Washington and America is still living in their own sort of Western bubble, where they believe that they don't have any chain of responsibility for the events that have happened that transform countries like Libya, for instance, Egypt to a lesser degree, but definitely Libya, because there was a military intervention that killed thousands and thousands of civilians. So this event here could easily be more than just an Islamic anti-American protest. That could have something to do with Gaddafi loyalists that are still being rounded up and arrested and extradited, particularly the recent extradition of Abdullah al-Senussi from Mauritania, a deal which the U.S. brokered for Libya.
Right now, are the new governments of Libya and Egypt too ill-prepared to protect diplomatic premises, or were these events just too unpredictable?
Well, you really have to look at this in a mature way. You know, for the U.S. to bomb and basically destroy a country and assassinate its head of state on worldwide television, and then for diplomats to go in, those diplomats have to realize that they're not innocent. They are parties in a major war crime, so they have to be on guard for that. To think that there's going to be normal diplomatic relations in a country like Libya that's totally unstable as a result of NATO intervention is a bit naive by Western pundits and political politicians and so forth in Washington and London. Nobody is innocent anymore. This is the new paradigm of the Western aggression that they have to accept as a reality.
Now, we're seeing a rise in Islamist groups, you know, rising at the dawn of the Arab Spring. Why are the radical elements proving so difficult for these countries to contain?
Well, you know, most of the radical Islamic elements in all of these countries are controlled by the West. A lot of the al-Qaeda factions are directed, controlled, and now funded openly, in the case of Syria, by Washington and London. So they have control of the radical elements. This is really an excellent divide and rule sort of situation, you know, to use this clash of civilizations, Islam versus Christianity or something like this. It's a great cover for a neo-colonial agenda and a technique of dividing countries into their respective compartments, compartmentalizing them, and then being able to rule over them either through the UN or through NATO or through other sort of transnational bodies.
Right. I mean, America has been spearheading these changes in Egypt as well as in Libya. You know, what do you think Washington is going to do after this?
Well, you know, Washington might look at this, and it is a tragedy. You know, our hearts go out to the council workers and Ambassador Stevens and his family. But look, the U.S. called all the dead Libyans collateral damage when they were working to take over that country and divide it into its corporate Bantustans. But you know, you can look at the death, this recent death, as collateral damage. This is still part of the aggression. So this is what's called the blowback of Washington and London's aggressive foreign policy. Ambassador Stevens and the staff there are collateral damage in the Western's agenda to march forward and to radicalize parts of these countries and to take over the Middle East in order to prepare the eventual confrontation with Iran, with Israel by its side.
You know, I think a lot of people will be asking, why were the American diplomats paying the tragic price when the anger supposedly directed at a film which has nothing to do with government? Why do you think that is?
Well, like I said, there's more to than meets the eye here. It's not just about the film. This anti-Western or anti-American angst that's coming from these groups. It's not just about what this film was depicted as. This film will come and go. It will wash away like the Danish cartoons. The real issue here, which is not being talked about, is that these people, the real angst is about the Western aggression, the violence, the killing from Afghanistan all the way to Libya, okay, across the whole arc of the Middle East and Central Asia. That is the big issue that people are not talking about. It's not so much about a religious or clash of civilizations. It's an anti-imperialist angst that's really, I believe, fueling this aggression towards America and some of these European leading NATO countries. This is the price that you will continue to pay. But the West will use this crisis as an opportunity to further either balkanize these countries or introduce other military United Nations peacekeeping forces, more possible NATO, small pockets of troops and so forth. They'll use this crisis as an opportunity, as they always have done. So we need to look through the narrative that's mainly a Western narrative here. It's funny that a lot of this news that really dominates our headlines in some of these Muslim countries is not the #1 story, actually, but we really fuel it and make it the #1 story to provide a difference, a clash, a Muslim versus Christian, West versus East. This is the narrative that the Western globalist imperialist elites love to carry on with.
Let me ask you about Ambassador Christopher Stevens. I mean, he was a key figure in arranging ties with Libya's post-revolution interim government. Does his tragic death signal a deep divide between the new leaders and the people of Benghazi?
Well, Libya was well divided before Ambassador Stevens even stepped foot in Libya. That country was divided as a result of the NATO intervention. And you have warlords and militias marauding around, have raided weapon stocks that were formerly held by the Gaddafi government. So it's absolute chaos. Meanwhile, though, what's very interesting is amongst all this chaos on the surface, the oil assets, the state utilities, the water assets, some of the agricultural assets, and some of the trade economic pockets have already been divided up by British companies, American companies, French companies, corporate companies. They've divided the country and sold off and are selling off its assets for pennies on the dollar in order to pay off the IMF's money injection that they've put into Libya as a result of it being blown up by NATO. So this is the game we saw in Iraq, and it's the game we're seeing in Libya, destabilization, but the corporations will still profit from this chaos, which they have done very efficiently. And that's also not really being talked about in the mainstream media.
Patrick Henningsen, a geopolitical analyst for the UK column Current Affairs website. Wish we had more time with you. Thank you for your time.